Welcome to the Leadership Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Jonno White. I'm the founder and principal consultant of Clarity. We are an Australian-based consultancy that works with leaders around the world, and our passion is to invest in people to become everything they're meant to be in order to fill the world with healthy organizations that people love to work for and customers line up to buy from. The goal of this podcast is to invest in you and your leadership. If you're just joining us for the first time, then feel free to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, the most popular being our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from around the world in all different sectors give their in-depth answers on leadership, what books they love, what they found most challenging, the most meaningful stories, how they structure their time through the day. That's free, so go and check it out. And we'd love to interview you about your leadership. I believe you have advice from your experience, your context, and your life so far that is important and can help other leaders. It's also a great way to give back. It's free to get involved, and you can do so by going to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest, or just Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form that pops up. We have a free resource for you on our website. It's called Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook. It has interviews with 10 world-class leaders, and you can go to consultclarity.org. It's right at the top, and get that today. We also have a daily email that we send out to over 15,000 leaders, and that email contains the highlights, our best content from our podcasts, our blog, my book, the books that we're loving that are out there about leadership. It's also the best way to get access to our masterclasses and workshops before anyone else. And there's also exclusive and limited special options just for subscribers. And you can subscribe by going to consultclarity.org/subscribe. Now, my gift to you is to work incredibly hard to provide the best leadership content I can to invest in you and your leadership. So if you're finding our content helpful, if you find this podcast helpful, then your gift to me could be this. If you do find it helpful, then write a review or rate our content and make sure you subscribe or follow. I can't emphasize enough how helpful that is. It really does help us to get the word out there so we can invest in more leaders to become everything they're meant to be. It also means a lot to me personally when people like you and people in our community share our content on social media. So if you do that, then please do look for me, Jonno White, to tag me, and look to tag Clarity on whatever platform you're on. And our team, including me, I'm always looking to see when people have mentioned us so that I can engage with you. And also we look at sharing content. So if you write something about something we've done, there's also a good chance we'll share that with our followers. So if you could do that, that is a massive, massive help as we try to invest in as many leaders as we can around the world. Last of all, you can check out my book about how to deal with difficult people even if you hate conflict. It's called Step Up or Step Out. It's available on Amazon. You can just look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or you can go to store.consultclarity.org/book and check it out there. I have coached leader after leader after leader, and in more than 50% of the sessions, this topic comes up. How do I deal with this person? I'm finding it really difficult, and I just want to find a way that doesn't blow up, to do just to have a difficult conversation, to lead them better. How do I do that? There's a 3-step process that I outline in this book that I believe can help you. Okay, let's get into today's episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast. Today's guest is Dane Groeneveld. Dane is the Chief Executive Officer at Huddle 3 Group. Welcome to the podcast, Dane.
Thanks, Jonno. It's really fun to be here and to be talking to a fellow Queenslander.
Yeah, that's right. Beautiful part of the world. But you're not based over here anymore. We'll find out about that in a moment. Yeah, tell us about what you do and a little bit about Huddle Through.
Yeah, you bet. So I grew up as a recruiter, and I've had a really interesting career the last, well, nearly, it's just over 20 years now. But the last 10 years, really supporting a lot of oil and gas projects on a global basis, deploying workforce into different countries, dealing with immigration, dealing with accommodation, transportation, emergency evacuation of workers in some pretty remote parts of the world, which has been really fun working with big companies, big oil companies. And more recently, I left to join a company called PTS Advance, which was a California-based recruiting business, staffing business for the California refinery market. Originally, they were founded in '95. So I joined them as CEO. And through the last 4 years, we've really started to innovate towards what we think is happening in the future of work as you see this big shift economically, politically, technologically, around climate change, sustainability at large with diversity, equity, inclusion, energy transition, carbon, low carbon transition. There's just so much happening, and therefore, my role today is running a group of companies. There's a number of staffing companies that we've combined through mergers and acquisitions as the core of the business. And we've got a software business, a small engineering firm, executive search group, and a maintenance group as well. So we're really looking at different ways to improve the human experience in the workplace through all of those changes that I just mentioned.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thanks for giving us a bit of an overview. Let's jump into your story, Dane. Starting with your childhood, growing up, what were some of the moments from that season in your life that really shaped you into the person and the leader you are today?
That's a cool question. Story-wise, I was born in Brisbane. My dad was a mining engineer. Mum was a nurse. And through the 80s and 90s, there was a lot going on in the mining industry. So we moved sort of every couple of years. I think I had about 8 schools before the age of 15. Lived in Kingaroy, when dad was at Troncoal, back to Brisbane, down to Tasmania, which was really cool. Had 4 years in Tasmania, up to Sydney, and then I moved to the UK when I was 15 and finished out high school there. So for me growing up, I think that opportunity to move around, to be exposed to different peer groups, school environments, geographies, it was really unique. It gave me an opportunity to kind of accelerate some learnings. Being the new kid on the block is pretty different when you move from sort of Tasmania, a country town in Tasmania, into the middle of Sydney. There's some real cultural challenges even within Australia as people move around. So I kind of got good at connecting with people and really learning about where people were at and how to fit in. And I think that gave me a lot of skills and a lot of appetite, a lot of interest for moving into recruiting and the whole world of work and the way that people interact in life.
Yeah, it's so interesting you mentioned that. Anyone who's been listening to a bunch of episodes in the podcast will be, as I am, just story comes up for when anyone grew up moving around a lot. It's one of said, and I was obvious now when you think about it, because when you're having to move to a new school, talk about entrepreneurship, talk about like how to face your fears. Like when you're a little kid or even a teenager and you need to break into a new circle of friends and build new connections in that formative time of your life, that is skills are like I feel like that's another level like of challenge compared to anything you'll ever do in business, because when you're that age needing to work the the social sort of norms and who's friends with who, that is a skill set that if you have to move around a lot as a child, it really seems to stick with you, and it comes up so often. I've really been surprised by it.
You're absolutely right. I think when you think about those childhood experiences, you kind of forced to flex your emotional intelligence muscle early on. You know, read the room. Um, you, but you also get this opportunity to be a little bit of a salesperson to kind of reimagine who you're going to be when you turn up in that new town, which is kind of a gift. Stressful, but it's kind of a gift. And you know, there's a lot of artistry that comes in to teamwork and how you build friends and social circles. And it is fascinating to think that whether the kids have moved around through having a parent in the military, or in my case, you know, mining industry or project construction environment, it's amazing the opportunities that I think some kids are drawn into. I don't think it's true for everyone. I certainly saw a lot of friends that suffered from all of the change. So I think I wouldn't say it's an absolute correlation, but I think for those people with a certain EQ muscle and appetite to take on the challenge, it's extremely reinforcing
Hmm.
as
Yeah.
as a proving ground, as a foundation.
Yeah, I'd agree. It doesn't work out that way for everyone, but if you are wired like that, like you said, if you've got maybe some natural bent towards entrepreneurship or sales, or emotional intelligence, it's like the ultimate sort of go through that I think is as a, not only are you so formative, but it's just harder when you're that age. Interested to know, Dane, as you reflect, can you think of the leadership opportunity you had where you felt like you're in the deep end, or you had to break through your first ceiling, where you had a bunch of people reporting to you, or you'd started your own thing, or you were responsible for a project, and you look back and you probably first really had to work out?
I would say there's three kind of elements of leadership for me. One was just in my family. I was the eldest of three siblings. So every time we moved, there was a little bit of a role for me to kind of set the tone and play with my brother and sister and find ways for it to make it fun. And my parents, you know, encouraged that. So that was an interesting early opportunity at playing the leadership role as an older sibling. I think then going into schools, the sporting field was really where I got opportunities to captain teams and really see what that was all about. You know, starting to have some decision making, some influence over how we played, how we positioned ourselves in the field, how we bonded as teammates. And then I think the really big jumping off point for me was probably actually, you know, later in life, like 29. I think I moved to Houston and I was thrown into running my first full P&L, first operation, and moving to a new country, taking on a team that I'd never worked with before. That was a really fun and challenging growth experience.
Yeah, that's full on. I always enjoy hearing stories like that where you've sort of got multiple variables of challenge all in one. Move countries, and than ever. What what were your biggest learnings in that season? Like you would have been doing other things where you had some bit. Now you're leading these people. You're in a different, really. There's this weight of responsibility on you. What was that like? What was the difference, and what did you learn?
I think the biggest thing I learned at that time was that I needed to boldly go forth and take action. I think my whole view on leadership is that it's one thing to read all the books and say all the right things and get people excited around a whiteboard or a strategy planning session, but leading with bold actions, acting big, bringing something new to the team that's a win. I think that's really critical for, particularly as a young leader, it's really critical for making an impact, building some credibility, showing you're human. You got to show some vulnerability there too. Um, you know, it's good for the team to see you struggling and grinding it out with them. I think that was really my biggest takeaway. That helped me a great deal.
And along the way for you, who have been some of the people that have had the biggest influence leadership journey so far?
I've been so lucky on that front. I think from growing up in the house with dad and watching his career as he moved from different mining projects, mining operations, and you know, I saw him move into different communities and mum move into different communities. I think mum and dad both played a big role. Uh, I think then moving into some of the representative sports teams I played with, some coaches that I thought did a brilliant job of just setting good boundaries, communications, values. And then in the workplace, uh, I've had two really good bosses. Funnily enough, they both started a graduate program together back in '96, and then they were working for different businesses. So um, both very insightful and provoking in the way that they embraced talent and didn't try and force their way of thinking or doing onto me as I was learning my kind of leadership trade. And and just gave me a lot of opportunity to experiment, gave me a lot of belief, gave me a lot of resource to go and do things, and at the same time gave me the necessary sounding board when I was a little bit outside of my comfort zone and I needed either some affirmation that I was on track or some redirection to get back on track.
Was there any mention a few things they did? Stories that stand out in your mind with either of uh, in advice or something that surprised you about how they handled the situation, um, conversation, or just watching them lead through a crisis and being amazed? Any stories from either of them that pop into your mind?
I mean, the good thing about working with both of those individuals was that we did come through a lot of crises, mainly positive crises. We were growing really fast and we had to quickly kind of run out there and build stuff so that we could keep delivering for our customers, for our employees. And I think I'm just thinking to a specific experience. I think what really helped me was that sitting down to frame out the discussion and say, hey, what are we trying to achieve here? What's what's the minimum what's the minimum requirement that we need to hit? And let's make sure we knock that out. But what else could we do? And I think in a number of those instances, whether we were trying to deal with an immigration challenge or we were trying to um, win a new contract and price a new bid, I thought it was fascinating that they would be very clear on saying we can't miss this mark, but go and be creative. And I think that opportunity to be creative, that's what allows us to really know what we're capable of doing as leaders and as teams. So
Mm.
I think I saw that from both of those individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. They sound like incredible mentors. What can you think of further along in your leadership journey? You mentioned being 29 and that sort of thrown in the deep end, moving countries. But can you think of any aha moments from early in your life in sports to recent where you were sort of in a situation and you made a mistake that you'll never forget, a lesson from that, or the penny really dropped around um, something that happened with the team and you were able to have a win that was really unexpected? Are there any sort of stories that come to mind of sort of aha moments for you as a leader so far?
I think I'm going through an aha moment right now. You know, it's easy as a leader to be head down on managing your day-to-day business, managing your team. And right now, I'm kind of waking up coming out of COVID and realizing that actually, the more time I spend out telling stories, sharing stories, listening to stories with not only my staff and my customers, but also just other people in industry, even if they're not in the same industry as me, um, it 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 allows me to as a leader, it allows me to have a very different level of connection with people and to maybe see around a few corners and a few blind spots. I think early in my career, I I would definitely, head down, be very blinkered in terms of what we were trying to achieve, and sometimes that would come at the cost of not hiring a person, not giving someone a chance, not going into a new market boldly. Where now I think the whole fabric of storytelling's really captivating my attention, and it's allowing me to have a much more meaningful interaction with that whole ecosystem that we engage with as a business leader. And that all of a sudden, if you're sharing that story and you're knowing what other people's stories are, then they start to somehow, sometimes very implicitly, sometimes much more explicitly, they somehow kind of throw up this display of, hey, you need to think a little bit more carefully on this, or maybe you move too quickly through that sales opportunity. You didn't really listen to the customer. So I think the whole role of storytelling and engaging in the community that you're a part of has been a big factor for me.
Yeah, I'm such a big fan of storytelling. I think it's underrated in so many ways. As one of the, I'd almost say it's one of the top 5 skills for any leader, because if you can tell great stories, you can communicate things that are otherwise very hard to get across, like the heart of an organization or the vision of where we're going. All those things are much easier through storytelling sentence, as much as we'd like to come up with those things. What have you learned about stories, like to a listener who's going, oh, I haven't really thought about this before? What advice would you give them about where to start?
Just start. It doesn't matter where you start. I think you're going to find your authentic self in storytelling. You're going to find your humor, your tone, your timing, whether you need to use props or a whiteboard. But I think you've got to start and just read what type of stories engage response and feedback from your audience. And I think I'm learning that a little bit late. I wish I'd done more storytelling earlier in life, because it's really interesting. I can walk into an investor meeting and they really like to be strict on numbers and spreadsheets, and I've got to tell a story that's a little bit more bland. And then I can walk into a customer and I can get up on a whiteboard and be really animated. I can walk into a team and I can tell a story about how I screwed up when my wife had my 3-month-old baby on her hip and there was no milk in the fridge, and I lost my temper in the morning. So you can tell stories in so many different ways. I think just starting and seeing what works when is actually the probably the biggest gift to storytelling. And you'll find it. You'll find what works for you. For me personally, I think over time I'm probably best when I can get up and tell a story that really connects back into my personal life and shows that authenticity, or when I'm drawing on the whiteboard. I think they're my two storytelling weapons.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I love the advice to just start and give it a go. Let's jump into Leadership Express. I've got a few questions for you, Dane. The first one is, what's a book that you've gifted, you've recommended it to other people?
I've got to admit, I used to read a lot of books, and now I'm really hooked on the Blinkist app. So I'm sending a lot of links to Blinkist. I don't know if you've come across it, Jonno, but it kind of gives you a 12 or a 20-minute summary of books. So it gives you the essence of the book. Right now, I would say some of the ones that I've been sending out, there was a really good book on partnering recently that I listened to. I like anything that Dan Pink's doing. I think he's got some good science, but some practical insights, like when on timing, and how you sort of time your day and meetings and your activities. So probably, yeah, they're probably the two books that stand out to me at the moment.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I have come across Blink. It's brilliant. I'm a big fan of summaries because I I go, read a bunch of summaries and then find one and you go, this could be a game changer, and then you actually go and read the whole book. I really love that
Yeah.
sort of approach. There's a great YouTube channel, actually. I've given him a plug a few times on this on the pod. It's called The Productivity Game, and he does animated summaries of productivity business books. And if you love Blinkist, you'll love his stuff. he does about one a week, but his insights, really reads the book and comes away with sort of his take on the big idea, but always with a bit of the I feel like sometimes summaries don't really capture the essence of a book, but he does it extraordinarily well. So yeah, that's another place. That's probably where I go the most, the productivity game. But I am yeah, I think I will check out something like Blinkist. I haven't done that before, but makes sense.
Yeah, I love animation, so I'm definitely going to look up the productivity game. That sounds very cool.
Love it. Yeah, he's really like the animations aren't anything amazing, but the way he expresses the ideas in the book, I could watch his videos all day long. The way you just essence of these amazing books one after another.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it's cool. What's a recent leadership lesson you've learned? You sort of mentioned an aha moment that's going on for you at the moment, but a recent leadership lesson you've learned for the first time, or it's something that you've been reminded of again.
Feedback. One of my coaches, one of my mentors that I'm working with right now, was talking to me about feedback and how it's always been a moving target, but it's become even more so through COVID and the fact that we've got remote relationships, so many more remote relationships than historically has been the case. So I think being much more timely on feedback when things are going off track and capturing people doing things that are great is where I've definitely got some work to do in the current sort of business climate. And I can see it. I had my team here in California last week for a big conference, and when you can just walk up to someone and say, "Hey, it's fantastic that you were able to knock that out this week. It was a great client win," or "It's fantastic you're able to promote one of your team members." That goes such a long way. But I think as a leader in a busy world, particularly as we've kind of ground our way through the pandemic, that's one that continues to kind of come up and bite me at the at the occasional moment.
Yeah, feedback is it's one of those topics as well that whenever I'm looking to see what's trending on leadership, I feel like it's always up there. How do you give good feedback? How do you receive? Actually, it's usually how do you give good feedback, not usually how do I receive feedback well, which I think is hilarious because it's so true of, who's out there searching, how do I make sure I take feedback better? Not as many people as how do I really make sure I tell people what's really annoying me. But as a leader, I think I love that idea. Oh, is it a Dan Pink? I'm trying to think of who it was who wrote a. I think it's called Drive. Is that a Dan?
Yeah,
Pink
that's
book?
Dan Pink. Yeah.
And he talks about one of the things in there is I think is about sort of feedback and this idea that that no feedback is actually more detrimental than negative feedback. That people who don't know where they stand on something or feel ignored or disregarded is actually creates problems than even just giving negative feedback. And I found that such an encouragement to be like, and I say it to leaders all the time, it's like even just realizing that giving people that, starting anywhere you can to give that feedback, and it's usually best in small you can rather than one big meeting about everything that's gone wrong and you've never gone there before. The little bite-sized moments where you say, hey, this, you sent this through to me and this part needs work, or I saw how you reacted in that and really need you to do X, Y, or Z differently. And realizing actually people want to know how they're going. They'll often struggle with it. And so we need to learn how to give it. But it's just anytime I see a leader who doesn't really give feedback, it's such a red flag because there's so many other things that come with it.
You're absolutely right. In fact, we had Dan Pink for 6 hours on Friday just past, so I've actually got a bit of his material fresh in mind, and he did a brilliant exercise in the room. He said, good or bad news, which one do you want to which one do you want to give first? Which one do you think your staff want to hear first? And most people in the room put up their hand and said, oh, you got to give the staff member the good news first. And then he said, okay, you guys are all really smart. Okay, if someone's giving you good and bad news, what do you want to hear first? And everyone puts their hand up saying, I want to hear the bad news first. It was such a visual, interactive kind of statement. And that's when Pink turns around to the whole audience and he goes, look, guys, don't think you're so special. Don't think that you as the leader are big enough, brave enough, and tough enough to just take the bad news first. Everyone actually wants that. In fact, you're not being brave. You're not being courageous if you're sugarcoating the message to your team members because you're not being fair and truthful to them. So I think that's the shift. I think you talked about it. Being able to receive feedback, being able to give feedback. We've got to get a little bit more clear on building that muscle memory.
One of my favorite little anecdotes from the podcast was from a school principal from Rockhampton, Dr. Philip Moulds. So a little regional part of Queensland. Well, not that little for people from Rocky, but a beautiful, beautiful spot. Don't want to make it sound negative. It's a lovely spot. But about this idea that he has this filter and he uses his kids' names. And I can't remember what their names are off the top of my head, but say it's like the Amanda test for his daughter. And he says the test is, if this employee was my daughter, what would I want her boss to do, and how would I want her to be led? And he said it's, well, for your kids, you'd want them to have a boss who actually had the guts to tell them and challenge them. And and I just thought, I was like, oh, that's such a great filter, because as soon as you put, anyone with kids, as soon as you put one of your kids, okay, if if they were sitting down with me and talking about their boss, what would I have wanted? How would I have wanted their boss to deal with them, to care for them, to challenge them? Because I realize it's so funny, isn't it? We're so irrational. How we do
we
things.
Really are.
We think we're so rational, and then that's a one thing did. But it's so true that people, anyone, we want ourselves. We're like, I want to be challenged. I want to know. But then we're the leader, and we're like, oh, I want to hear that. That's so true. Let's go to the next. Do you have any favorite questions you ask? You've got a lot of people on your team. You have stakeholders, investors that you'd be meeting with. Are there any questions that you find yourself asking more than others, as sort of Dane's favorite questions?
Yeah, there's a lot of good questions that I kind of have in the locker that I'll go to. I guess it depends if I'm interviewing someone or I'm sensing what an investor or a customer is going after. I think right now a theme that I'm really interested in is teamwork and the interception of people and machines technology in teamwork. So I'm often asking people a lot about, what is it that you're seeing? What is it that you're excited about in the world of work as you see technology? Because technology is daunting. It's overwhelming. There's so much of it all of a sudden. But what is it that excites you about how it might impact your day at work and your day away from work, your time with your family, your time out doing hobbies and sports? That's a big one I'm asking a lot of people right now, because it gives you a sense of where they want to be, and maybe it gives you an idea of how you can help them to get there, whether it's a client or a staff member or a partner. So I think that's a big theme that means a lot to me right now and seems to be getting a lot of traction.
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that. What is a commonly held belief in your industry that you passionately disagree with?
Oh, that's a good one. If I thought about we serve a number of industries. We do recruitment, but we do it for oil and gas industry at large. So maybe if I picked the oil and gas industry, I think a commonly held belief in the oil and gas industry is that it's not good for the environment. And I think it might sound a little bit controversial, but I think that's only one part of the story. And I think that, it's taken us 100+ years to develop this kind of dependence on hydrocarbons. And it is a dependence, and it's going to take us more than 5 or 10 years to move on from it. So I think there's a big opportunity right now for everyone to sort of widen their belief set as to the role that hydrocarbons, that oil and gas can play in the energy transition. I think there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of brilliant minds, there's big balance sheets that can make a positive difference. And if we can stop being so polarized in our views of good for the environment, bad for the environment, and all start meeting a little bit more in the middle on where can we generate innovation, I actually think that a lot more good can be done, a lot more partnering can be done, and we see some organizations that are driving that agenda pretty well. Certainly here in the US, but there's more work to do.
Yeah, that's a great thought. Um, what a, what about what are or challenges that you see CEOs facing across different sectors? In 20 things like COVID, but which could be the one you pick. But yeah, what's a big problem or challenge for a CEO these days?
I actually think it's people, and I'm going to say that because I'm a people guy, but I actually think we've come out of COVID. There's a lot of talk about great resignation. There's this kind of flood of technology. We really tore up the playbook through COVID. And I actually think that's a good thing, as much as it's been painful for a lot of people to get through. So I think right now, getting people excited, engaged, focused on where they can be productive, where they can continue to develop their skills and find meaning at work, that's probably one of the biggest challenges any CEO in any sector is going to face, because we're in this really unique, I guess every environment's unique. We're in this really interesting time of, there's high inflation. People have been fatigued through all of the change we've gone through. There's a shortage of good talent with all of the demand that's kind of burst out um, of the pandemic, and now we've got geopolitical issues like Russia and Ukraine, and social issues that are emerging. There's just so much going on. People are so fatigued, and at the same time eager to see something different. I think any CEO right now has got to be thinking long and hard about what type of experience they're creating for their people. And that's not just employees, that's people who may be customers of their business, people who may be partners or vendors of their business. There's a real human, um, there's a real opportunity to drive better human experience right now for businesses. And I think the people who rewrite the playbook well are going to be the people who lead companies to real success.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a massive challenge, but it is the ultimate opportunity that if you can, crack the code so that people feel even something as simple as feel appreciated. One thing that's been really interesting for me on that, Dane, I probably came into doing this big believer in work-life balance. I talk about it a lot, and from doing this podcast and chatting with great leaders who are doing incredible things in all different parts of the world, in all different sectors, I've really changed my mind, and I'm now completely on board with this idea of work-life integration. And
Yeah.
I think we've got to stop assuming that people are they're not finding enough balance in their life. And we've got to change that thinking and go, actually, what if it's achieving this work life integration? Because if anyone's experienced that, where you actually really love what you do and you feel appreciated and you're part of a team that's like being part of a winning team that's actually achieving incredible things at work is one of the best things you can experience in life. Um, Change the conversation a bit, and for leaders it's about how do I create, how do I hold an open hand to a bunch of different variables so that I can find and keep amazing people who can have work life integration with my organization. That's been a revelation for me.
Yeah, John, I agree. I think work-life integration is a key part of it, and I think it goes actually a step further than work-life integration for my employees or my teams. Because if you're going to truly integrate now as a company or that has employees or has consumers, you need to find a way for that individual to be integrating the work life with their family members, particularly coming out of COVID, because there's a lot of families that are carrying fatigue. So it can't just be about the employee or the customer. It's got to be about who they're living with, who they're spending their time with, and that is that's a hard nut to crack. There's something there. I think as businesses, certainly our businesses are starting to invest much more in how we support our team members to do great things with their friends and family out of work. That's becoming much more central to our general wellness, general employee benefits philosophy. And I think there's a theme emerging, particularly here in the US, but I think Australia, the UK, Europe are all following in suit on that theme.
Yeah, it's all part of that opportunity, isn't it? If you can really, like, if you can imagine someone saying, I work for this organization, I love what I do, and this are really important to me, my family's really important to me, or being able to travel with friends, because we're talking about big shifts, some paradigm shifts that we need to have, that people are going to be breaking new ground, and it's going to look crazy, and then in 20 years everyone will be embracing it. I love that you mentioned that as the challenge, people, because it's both the biggest challenge and the biggest opportunity. Because, like you said, the Great Resignation isn't just about people leaving; they're going somewhere. They're wanting something different. They're wanting to be part of something where they feel less anonymous. They feel more like they understand the purpose behind what they're doing. And I think leaders, having excuses that that's impossible. It's like, it is possible. You just got to work out how to crack code to give people that purpose, and to unlock it.
Yeah, and there's some cool technologies that are coming out in that space. I spoke to Suzanne Conrad yesterday, who on my podcast actually, and she was once the director of possibility for Lululemon, the big retail brand, and she had a great phrase. She said, "Everything in the world of work is kind of dissolving and evolving," and she talked about that, you know, building into your future self, sort of remember. She also used the phrase remembering your future self. So it's almost to your point, the challenge creates a huge opportunity for people to be very much more intentional than they ever have been about where they're going and how they're going to get there in and out of work. So it's a really cool time to be in business and contributing to society.
Okay, a light-hearted question, or you can pick something serious, up to you. But that is a favorite of yours, either for switching off or something you.
I love The Last Kingdom on Netflix. I'm all about Vikings right now. I think it's really cool to escape into how people were living in the 600s, 700s, 800s in the UK and in Europe. So that's really fun. And I can draw on some pretty cool business analogies when I see how those guys are rocking and rolling.
Yeah. So what's it?
The Last Kingdom.
The Last Kingdom. Okay, I'll check it out. It's something that's come up a couple of times that just makes me. Peaky Blinders. Did you ever watch Peaky Blinders?
Oh, yeah, that was a fantastic series. I think
So
series
good.
5 got a little bit dark and heavy, but the first 4 I loved.
And I just love hearing people say, look, I love that show. And to be honest, there's some great leadership lessons in there. I'm like, yeah, that, like, it's just watching leading the family and these really different stakeholders who want, like, and finding a solution that's a win-win. And yeah, enjoy the switch off of shows like that, but at the same time, you're right. There's always these great, because leadership is really life. It's just, it's just one, so that you always look at these people in these different, in a TV show like that, and 100% there's stuff that we can learn and implement. And I don't think people should ever feel guilty. Sometimes we feel like it needs to come from a really great nonfiction book to be legit, but I'm a big fan of spectrum in terms of humor, The American Office. And oh man, so episodes where I just think, man, that is such a great what not to do. It's just so many, and they just hit the nail on the head so many times with these incredibly awkward things. I've done something like that. Like not that level of social awkwardness, but the heart of that is actually, and yeah, so I learned so much from things like that.
Yeah, that is cool. And there's also an argument on the science fiction side that, you look at some shows. I was talking to a potential advisory board member last night, and we were talking about the Jetsons and how science fiction and comics and things kind of project what we could have in the future, and that there's a lot of play in that. I think I think any form of imagination, kind of like the theme of storytelling, or just reframing of problems, it can be so valuable to everyone, in whether they're in a leadership role or if they're a key individual contributor in a design team or whatever it might be. There's a lot of value in just breaking away, getting some perspective.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, last question. This has been so much fun. What if you could only give one piece of leadership advice to a young leader? What would you say to them?
I would say just be pioneering. Go and try a whole bunch of stuff early on. Don't be afraid of getting it wrong. Embrace the opportunity to learn. I think if Dan Pink said this on Friday, he's like, thinking is doing and doing is thinking. There is particularly now at a time of real change, don't overthink it. Just go and take action, learn from it, and keep iterating. I think that's huge. I think if my early leadership opportunities were in far more static and stable environments than what we're dealing with now. So I think it's more important now than ever.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. It's such great advice, and it's probably the biggest thing. I agree for a young leader. I look back at myself and I think I just wanted to get it right. I wanted a linear path to some amazing leadership role. Even the most incredible things, and it's never linear. It's never linear. There's always highs and lows. There's always, I took that on and I don't know what I was thinking because it was crazy, but I learned all of this. And so I think if I could say something to myself as a younger leader, I love your advice there. It's like, just embrace, go and pioneer it, because yeah, thinking is doing. I love that. So that's one of my favorite things. A little quote was, that learning, when it comes to leadership, learning is in the doing. And I was like, oh, that's so true. This doesn't matter how many books you read. You step into a role, and it's like you get the equivalent of like 10 nonfiction books of of leadership lessons just handed to you every week, because you're just working things out as you go, and it's just stepping out into the deep end.
Absolutely.
Well, for people who've just loved hearing a bit of your story and your advice, tell us about your podcast. Tell us about where else people can find you online as well, Dane.
Our podcast isn't even live. We've just started shooting the first few shows. So we're starting the Future of Teamwork podcast. It should be out on the usual channels, kind of Spotify and Apple. And we'll be putting a few snippets out on LinkedIn as we get into June and July. But that's something I'm really excited about bringing out. And generally, LinkedIn is where a lot of people in my industry live. So always happy to connect with people and share some ideas, partner up on some cool initiatives. It's just great to be lifting the head up and connecting with people in a time of so much change and opportunity.
100%. Love it. Well, thanks to our listeners for great to chat about a whole bunch of things and hear some of Dane's story. Don't forget, for our listeners, I also have the Jonno White Leadership Podcast and the Leadership Question of the Day podcast, 2 places you can go to continue to invest in your leadership. But I want to finish today by saying a massive thank you to you, Dane, for being so generous with your time, for sharing vulnerably about your story, and I really appreciate that. And with as well, it's been great to have you on the.
Yeah, thanks, Jonno. It's been a blast. Really fun.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Leadership Conversations podcast as much as I did. If you're joining us for the first time, don't forget to check out consultclarity.org. That's our website, consultclarity.org. We have so many free resources on there, including our 7 Questions on Leadership series. We've had more than 1,500 leaders from all over the world in all different roles, in different industries, answer these 7 questions on leadership, and leaders give these in-depth answers around how they spend their time, a book that's been significant for them. It's just a gold mine. It's completely free to access, so go to consultclarity.org and look for that. We'd also love to interview you about your leadership. I believe your experience, your life, your context means that you have advice on leadership that other leaders can learn from. Yes, you. If you're going, not me, well, no, I really believe you would have something to add. So if you're looking for a way to give back, it's completely free to get involved. And we would love to interview you through the 7 Questions on Leadership. You just go to consultclarity.org/7-questions-interest or Google consultclarity.org 7 questions interest and fill out the form and get involved. We have a free resource on our website called the Leadership Survival Guide. It's a 57-page ebook, 10 world-class leaders giving their thoughts on leadership, and that's completely free. It's available on our homepage, consultclarity.org, right at the top, so make sure you go and get that and download it today. And we have a free daily email that you can subscribe to. We send this out to over 15,000 leaders from around the world. And it contains the highlights of content from our podcasts, our blogs, our books we're reading. It's got the best content, and it gives you exclusive, limited, early access to our masterclasses, workshops, new products, special offers. It's all for our subscribers. You can go to consultclarity.org/subscribe and join 15,000 other leaders. And you know, my gift to you is to work really hard, particularly through the Leadership Conversations podcast. I have been blown away by the quality of the leaders, and I'm learning as much as anyone in doing these interviews. So I'm having a great time. And my gift to you is to keep lining up the best leaders I can to invest in your leadership. Your gift to me, if you're finding this helpful, there is something that you could do that would help us out massively. And that is to write a review and to leave a rating for our podcast or wherever you're watching or listening to this. I can't tell you how much that helps us out. Also, subscribe or follow. It really does make a difference in helping us to help more leaders become everything they're meant to be. Another thing that means a lot to me personally is when I see our community share our content. So if you do share this or any other piece of content on social media, then thank you, and please do that. And look for me, Jonno White, or Clarity, and tag us in your post. Our team is always looking for posts to engage with from our community, and there's also a chance that we'll share your content to go beyond and share it with our followers. Last of all, you can check out my book. It's called Step Up or Step Out: How to Deal with Difficult People Even If You Hate Conflict. I wrote this book because 50% of the coaching sessions I have with leaders, this topic comes up again and again and again. And it's this idea of, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I lead this person better when I'm finding them difficult? Or in some cases, you look and you say, I think I might be leading a difficult person. They're just quite difficult to lead, or I'm finding them quite difficult to lead. So there's a 3-step process that I unpack in Step Up or Step Out. And the amazing thing, and I've literally done this myself, and I've heard it anecdotally from other leaders as I've coached them, is that if you follow this process, you will see that person step up and change their behavior or make a decision, which is to step out some of the time. 95% of the time, people will step up or step out in just 4 weeks. And I stand by that. It's you have to read the book to understand, but I really do believe in it, and I've experienced it firsthand. It works. So you can go to Amazon, look up Step Up or Step Out Jonno White, or store.consultclarity.org/book. Well, thank you so much for listening. We're going to be back with a new episode next time of the Leadership Conversations podcast. And I hope today has helped you to take another step towards becoming the leader you're meant to be. See you next time.